Now verse 18 is the key point, how prototokos does not mean preeminent through context, but a literal first. Verse 18. Kaiatos estin, he kephele, tu samatos tes ecclesias hos estin harke. Prototokos ekton negron ina genestai, en pasin atos proton. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. There's your key word, MBI3030, preeminent, proton. If Paul wanted us to believe Jesus was the preeminent one, he would have used prototokos a third time. He didn't. He knew the difference between proton and prototokos. He didn't use these words interchangeably. He used them differently. He meant what he wrote. Jesus is the first of all of God's creation in verse 15. And he was consistent using firstborn in verse 18, because Jesus is the first to rise from the dead, to have immortality. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 20. But now hath Christ been raised from the dead, the first fruits of them that are asleep. But the New Revised Standard Version Bible makes it more clear. But in fact, Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. Yet, the New World Translation makes it even more clear. However, now Christ has been raised up from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep in death. Paul wasn't telling us in Colossians 1:18 that Jesus is the preeminent one from the dead, but the first in line to be resurrected from the dead. So after all that has been said, my question to you and your top Greek professor is, why didn't Paul use proton and prototokos interchangeably? Paul was consistent using firstborn in verse 15 and 18, informing his reader that Jesus was the first in line of creation, to be created, and first in line to be resurrected from the dead. And toward the end of verse 18, Paul tells us that in everything he might be preeminent, using the word proton, not prototokos. So in review, we see Jesus isn't the image of himself, but the icon of his God. We see Jesus is the first created, the first in line of all creation, and the first to be resurrected from the dead, to have immortal life, the prototokos. We see Jesus isn't the initiator of creation, but creation was the atou through him. And finally, we see prototokos was not used as preeminent one, because Paul already used the term in verse 18, proton. Colossians chapter 1 verse 16, because by means of him all other things were created in the heavens and upon the earth, the things visible and the things invisible, no matter whether there are thrones or lordships or governments or authorities. All other things have been created through him and for him.